Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the webinar. We'll just wait for a couple more minutes till kicking off at 2 o'clock. Okay, I see people still filtering into the webinar, so I'll just pause for another couple of seconds and wait for the attendees to file in, and then we'll get started. Super. Okay, let's kick it off. Good afternoon, everyone, or hello, wherever you are. A very warm welcome on behalf of 4evergreen to everyone joining our webinar today. The webinar is titled Unlocking the Toolbox to Perfect Fiber-Based Packaging Circularity. And we're very pleased to share our insights on two of our deliverables in today's session. And also give a bit of a sneak peek into what's next and what you can expect from 4evergreen Alliance in the coming months. So many thanks for joining us. We've got quite a packed agenda that I'll walk you through. But first, as an introduction from my side, my name is Sarah Price. I'm 4evergreen Chair this year, as well as the Director of Sustainability with SAPI Europe. And today, I'm the moderator for the session, so pleasure to be with you. In terms of just a couple of housekeeping items, I just want to make a point that this webinar is being recorded and inform you of that. And I would also like to call out the Q&A function that you see in the Teams window at the top. Please feel free to use that Q&A function to pose any questions and really do that throughout the webinar. We'll come to those questions at the end of the session, but please feel free to be dropping questions in as we go through the presentations. Our moderators in the background will also be organizing, compiling them, the questions as we receive them, and then they will publish them as we get into the discussion section at the end. So please feel free to post any and all questions there. Now, our agenda for today's session, we put together quite a rich agenda, and we will keep you well entertained for the next hour and a half, sharing all of our insights and information around our deliverables. And when I say we, it's because I'm actually joined today by a number of 4evergreen member representatives who have been preparing this webinar over the last weeks and months, but also very happy to be joined by many of them today as well to give the presentations to these different agenda points. So just to quickly give an introduction to the agenda, we'll start with a brief introduction of 4evergreen, and I will do that myself. And then we will move to a session on the Circularity by Design guideline. And this presentation will be delivered by Peter Gurlitz from Sunoco. Then we move on to the Recyclability Evaluation Protocol session. And this presentation will be delivered by Peter Heinzgebach from Store Enzo, as well as Johannes Ziffel from Delcy. Then we move into testimonials. We've got 3  4evergreen members joining us today as well to discuss how they've put some of these deliverables into practice. We have Fabio Peyer from Mondi. We have Niels de Rijbel from Amcor, as well as Wilk Fulcher from Actega. So those 3 representatives will also be presenting today. And then finally, we'll have our Q&A session before wrapping up. So before we kick off the formal agenda, just to give a quick introduction to 4evergreen. For those of you that are new to 4evergreen and maybe aren't so familiar, but we're a cross-industry alliance from across the European fiber-based packaging value chain. There's currently over 110 members within the 4evergreen Alliance, and these members are mostly companies, research institutes that represent different parts of the fiber-based packaging value chain. So you can see in that nice diagram on the right side, all the different segments, and our membership covers and represents different companies from within each of those segments. So by working across the value chain, we can share different insights and different expertise together within this alliance. And you may ask what brings us together, but it's essentially this common goal that we've defined for ourselves, and that's to raise the overall recycling rate of fiber-based packaging in Europe to 90% by 2030, and moving beyond where we currently sit today around 82.5% or 82%. Just to give you a taste of the members currently within 4evergreen, I won't go through them all, but you probably recognize a lot of the different logos on the screen right now. And those are all the different organizations that are currently within 4evergreen, but we also continue to grow, adding new members nearly every month. So how does 4evergreen make a difference towards this common goal that we share of increasing the recycling rate of fiber-based packaging? Well, we take quite a technical approach in addressing the different challenges and opportunities associated with perfecting circularity. So you can see in these different circles the work streams that we have running within 4evergreen. And these are populated by our members, by representatives working for our member organizations. And they're really focused on all these different aspects of improving recyclability. So the first one, work stream number 1, is focused on the recyclability evaluation protocol. Second work stream is focused on the circularity by design guideline. Third work stream is focused on guidance on improved collection and sorting. And then we've got 2 relatively new work streams as well. One is focused on standardization, so really looking to leverage 4evergreen's deliverables into various standardization processes that are ongoing, as well as a future innovation group. So this one's building on our previous work stream focused on innovation, and this is a new area that we're kicking off, looking more at systems innovation for fiber-based packaging circularity. And then we have the work stream number 5, which is focused on spreading the word, and really where that group is focused on is working together to find ways to inform, educate, and engage our various stakeholders and really get our deliverables into practice. So that's how we are organized and how we're working within 4evergreen. And today's webinar will very much focus especially on those first 2 circles, those first 2 work streams and deliverables. And I guess just in summary and in a nutshell, before going into more depth within the webinar today, what's in it for the packaging value chain? How is 4evergreen's deliverables relevant? And really our deliverables form this toolkit, and the toolkit's helping companies, but also the sector as a whole, reach our sustainability and circularity ambitions. Firstly, we're really focused on developing harmonized ways to evaluate if products are recyclable and in which mills they should be recycled in, and to make sure and understand if the products affect the recyclability of fiber-based packaging. Secondly, we're looking at, we've produced a tool, and this is the Design for Recyclability Guideline, to understand how different components, elements, and materials of fiber-based packaging can impact its recyclability. And thirdly, we share expertise and guidance to make the collection and sorting of products at the source more harmonized and effective, and really making sure that products are recycled properly and don't become waste. So you'll hear much more detail in our presentation, but in a nutshell, that's our objective and how 4evergreen's deliverables can support circularity. Just to briefly touch on the EU Packaging and Packaging Waste Regulation, the PPWR. It's a very hot topic for packaging professionals currently, and I just wanted to provide a few words just to kind of contextualize the link between 4evergreen and the PPWR, since it's probably on many of your minds. The first important thing is to kind of understand that 4evergreen was established before the PPWR. So we've been running for a number of years now within 4evergreen, working on this ambition to increase the recycling rate of fiber-based packaging. So we've come before the PPWR, but indeed now that we have more clarity around this regulation, it's also given our alliance and our collaboration, I would say, even more meaning and urgency. And some of the interfaces between 4evergreen and the policy context, even though we're not focused on policy advocacy within 4evergreen, our approach towards the PPWR currently focuses on collective understanding. So working together within 4evergreen to better understand the changing packaging landscapes and requirements and its implications for our industry and our tools. So we spend a lot of time with internal discussions, webinars, panel discussions, etc., just making sure we have a common understanding of the PPWR as we know it today and as it relates to our deliverables. We're also focused on leveraging the technical expertise that we have within the Alliance with all these member companies and experts engaged in these topics. So we develop tools, guidelines, and protocols to improve the overall recycling rate for fiber-based packaging. To deliver recyclable packaging and develop future-focused innovations, which are really common objectives shared with the PPWR. So we're looking to find ways to leverage this expertise within the context of the PPWR. And finally, this point around collaboration. So our technical work really is a way of essentially positioning 4evergreen as a go-to source for technical information. And we hope to really leverage that within the PPWR secondary legislation process and some of the standardization processes that are already underway. So that's a little bit just to touch on this link between this regulation and 4evergreen's focus on the technical aspects and hoping to leverage that technical aspects into informing secondary legislation going forward. And last from me, before passing on the baton, is I would just like to give a highlight of all the 4evergreen deliverables are already available on our website. What we've been working on is next versions of them. So we've been revising different parts of our toolkit. And today you'll get some of the information coming from Workstream 1 and Workstream 2. But I just wanted to share a timeline of these upcoming deliverables that will be released over the next quarter, so that you can also keep an eye open for them as they're released. The first one in October, November, a new version of our guidance on collection and sorting, which we won't talk so much about today. And then next January, looking towards the next version of our recyclability evaluation protocol, parts 1 to 3. So that's an introduction to 4evergreen and just a little bit of a context setting for today's webinar. I'm now delighted to pass the floor over to Peter Gorlitz, who's going to walk us through the Circularity by Design guideline. Thanks, Peter.
Thank you, Sarah. And I'm happy to welcome you to my part of the presentation and to this webinar as a whole. I hope you will get a short glimpse into what you can expect in the design guideline of 4evergreen and maybe how to work with it. There we go. As you can imagine, the design is a very vital part in the circularity of a packaging because it stands basically at the beginning of its lifetime, and it is there where you define how it will perform during its lifetime and even at the end of its lifetime. As you already heard, we do have an ambition, and that ambition is that with our designs, we basically carry the recycling rate of fiber-based packaging to a level of even above. And we hope with the tools that we provide to you, in particular this design guideline and the assessment protocols, you will be able to improve the packaging. You will also see that it is all kind of interconnected, because you could basically say, let's start with the design guideline and then let's test if I have designed correctly and improve. Or you could also say, let me test and see what is the performance and then look into the design, how I can even improve. And even within 4evergreen, we see that way that we basically work from work stream to work stream and take what we learn in one work stream and include it then in the deliverables of the next work stream. Now, what is basically the structure of the design guideline? The core part are what I have here in the middle on the bottom. These are the part 1, 2, and 3 on the guidelines, how to design a packaging for standard recycling, which is part 1, how to design a packaging for de-inking mills, which is part 2, and part 3 has 2 sections, which is basically for specialized mills. One is for used beverage cartons, the other one is for fiber-based composite packaging. Which one to choose is based on your assessment, but you can also use the decision tree which comes within the document, which I will introduce to you in the next slide. Please be mindful that the assessment, or rather the guidelines, will be on a material level. So you will see materials and different types of materials and how they perform. And we considered in that assessment basically how does it perform in sorting and how does it perform in pulping. The focus is on the fiber recovery and less on the non-fibrous recycling. This has been considered, heavily considered, in the used beverage carton section, but for all the other ones, we are aware of it, but we do not assess and we do not give recommendations of this non-fibrous recycling. Please also be mindful when using the guidelines that we are giving recommendation based on one single material or material group. If you start using this for your packaging and you start combining different materials, it could be that this has an impact on the behavior of sorting or pulping, and therefore might deviate from the assessment and rating that we have basically seen and written down in the guidelines. Furthermore, if you are designing a packaging, it's not only dependent on the recyclability, is not only dependent on its materials, but also on the physical properties. And this one is not regarded in our guideline. And the last limitation that I would like to mention is that when you look at our document, and as Sarah already said, we started working on these documents already way before PPWR. We are not saying that you can take it as a PPWR ready compliance checklist, but you will basically be able to go have a good start and assess it from a point of view of recyclability in general, and also basically take it from there and then align with PPWR if that is your intent. Now let's come to the decision tree, which basically tells you which part of the design guideline is probably the most relevant to me. And we start on the top left, where the first question would be, is the paper content above 50%? If the answer is no, it's not above 50%, then we would say this is not a fiber-based packaging, and therefore our guidelines do not apply to this type of packaging. If the answer is yes, and it is a liquid packaging carton, then you will find your guidelines in the section for specialized mills and in the subsections for UBCs. If it's not a liquid packaging carton, but with a low paper content below 80%, then you also go to the specialized mill section, but you will look then into the section of fiber-based composite packaging. The same applies to if you are above 80% paper content, but you have a heavily coating on both sides, so a two-side coated material or packaging, then we would also recommend to look into the section for specialized paper mills. For all the other ones, you basically have the option to consider the part for standard paper recycling or for recycling in a flotation de-inking mill. Further information you will find in the section where the decision tree is explained. Now I'm taking you to one of those, and I'm coming with two examples. The first example here is just for a general overview, and the second one just to emphasize on it. You will find tables like this, and they have a headline and basically say, this is a table for, in this case, a de-inking recycling mill, part 2. And then you have different parameters or topics on the left-hand side and sub-parameters applying to it. I have selected for our first example here one which talks about fillers and inorganic pigments. You see that I have selected talc and titanium dioxide, and you see in the middle part the compatibility with recycling. We have a section fully compatible, conditionally compatible, not compatible, and one column which says unknown. In that case, 4evergreen does not have sufficient information to basically conclude on the performance in recycling, and we will state it as such. The last column, as you can see, is for comments and give further explanation on the rating or something which you should know on top of what you see about recyclability rating. Please also be aware that the middle part, where you can see fully compatible, conditionally or not compatible, is a multiple choice section. So you might see access in different parts of this. In our case, you can see that talc is fully compatible with recycling in the inking paper mill, whereas titanium dioxide is only conditionally compatible. And the further information is that if you put a lot of this into your packaging, it might have a negative impact when it comes to recycling because it weakens the strength in the recycled paper. Now I'm showing you a second part of the or a second example of the part for standard recycling. Here I picked the one for extrusion barrier coating. We do have extrusion barrier coating where one side is coated with the thermoplastic and then the other one below is where two sides are coated. In the first case, you see this case where we basically say it could be either fully compatible with recycling, no big issues, or conditionally and might cause some problems, or might even be considered not recyclable. That is also an option. In that case, what you need to do is basically consider the thickness of the coating and also the type of the coating, but in general, the answer would come from a recyclability test according to the SEPI harmonized test method. If you go below and you look to the two-side coated version, you basically see that we have said, no, this is not compatible with recycling for a standard recycling paper mill. However, as you might remember, I just showed you in the decision tree, if you have such a type of packaging, it would be recommended to check the design guidelines for in the specialized paper mills for fiber-based composites or also for used beverage cartons. The chapters with the design guidelines are various. You can see on the left-hand side that we talk about additives, coatings, inks, adhesives, and other parameters, and all of them have design guidelines. The status of the document is that, as you can already see and as you can already download from the web page, that part 1 is available for standard recycling, part 3 for UBCs is available, and we will see the new part 2 for flotation de-inking recycling mills in the upcoming release. Part 3 is still in the working, so you will have to wait a bit longer to basically see recommendations for this part because this is also the most complicated one. I'm repeating a bit what I already said earlier. All the ratings that you can see here are based on expert opinion, which have been aligned internally in 4evergreen, but also with industry stakeholders. Now, it is our vision and our mission to incrementally replace those expert opinion-based results with evidence-based results. We have done testing a lot in 4evergreen, and we are going to continue to do so, and hopefully be a bit more specific for certain criteria, as you have seen in our table in the future. I mentioned it before, and I want to stress it again. The guidelines that you can see here are not directly to be translated into a PPWR recyclability score. They are not meant to be for this. However, and that is also what Sarah mentioned before, we are using our rich expertise and results to basically use it as an input in a standardization process. And from our experience, we have seen that authorities already refer to the guidelines of 4evergreen today. So what can you expect in version 3 in the design guideline? Well, obviously, we were very busy in the last months to add new content and amend the one that we have already done. Sarah also mentions the PPWR reference, so there is some regulatory update and how 4evergreen integrates into this part. And obviously, we have integrated all the feedback that we received from the industry into the new document. Next, the decision tree has been updated. The big new thing is, and which takes most of this new space, is part 2 for the inking recycling paper mills, which is supposed to be now in the new version. As I already mentioned before, we don't have this guideline for the fiber-based composite packaging of part 3. However, we already started opening the chapter and writing important information, so this chapter is also new. The whole guideline basically closes with a flowchart, and this flowchart will hopefully help you to do a theoretical assessment of the recyclability of your packaging following the different flows without having to test. However, if certain information are too vague or the flow basically takes it there, you might come to the conclusion that you have to test to basically determine if the packaging is recyclable. This closes my part of the presentation. Thank you for your interest in this part, and I'm happy to answer your question on the design guidelines in the Q&A session.
Super. Thanks so much, Peter. A great presentation, and I think a really clear overview of the design for recyclability guidelines and what's coming in the next version. And next, we're going to move to maybe if someone jumps forward one slide, whoever has control. Is that you still, Peter? Perfect, thank you. Great, so now I would be happy to pass the floor over to Johannes and to Peter to present to us the recyclability evaluation protocol work. And Johannes, I think you're up first, so over to you.
Yes, also good afternoon from my side. Happy to be here for the webinar. I start with a question, why actually do we need a European recyclability evaluation protocol? First of all, European institutions are very strongly focused on circular economy, and recycling is a perfect example of circular economy. However, circularity is not infinite, and we always need new fibers entering the loop. Secondly, there's a different amount and variety of fiber-based packaging on the market, and it becomes more and more complex. Of course, also that means adaptations will be needed to increase the material of the recovery. Then, the third point is the industry is constantly innovating to increase the recycling rate of fiber-based packaging, but there's a lack of a really harmonized, objective method to assess and especially also to compare different packaging suitability for efficient recycling. Last but not least, as we just heard by Peter, is also PPWR calls for a design for recycling approach, which needs to be based on design table, but also this design table require a defined test and evaluation protocol to feed the data in. And of course, as we heard before, the evaluation protocol is also very strongly supporting the goal of 4evergreen to reach a 90% recycling rate by 2030. And also, should be also be reminded by us that fiber-based packaging in Europe, from paper cups to cardboard and corrugated boxes, represent about 38% of all packaging on the market in Europe. So if we solve this protocol, we have already almost half of the market of packaging material. On the next slide, you see a little bit that it's much more in it, but also even beyond technical recyclability. So the bigger puzzle is we need to have a holistic cradle-to-cradle approach, and this starts emerging everywhere. Recyclability actually means the compatibility of packaging with the managing and processing the waste by design, based on these guidelines, based on a separate collection. Then follows the sorting. Then in the next step will be the recycling at scale. And in the end, of course, we want to use the recycled materials to replace primary raw materials again. So these all steps have to be considered. The question is now, what is actually a recyclability evaluation protocol? It is a tool that helps to evaluate empirically individual fiber-based packaging products and score the suitability for recycling in standard recycling mills, flotation de-inking mills, and specialized recycling mills. There are basically two elements in it. All our testing is based on the CEPI test method, which is used by 4evergreen, but we at 4evergreen, we evaluate the recyclability evaluation protocol. We have from our members and from our work a vast amount of data. And this data are provided by the members, and we have already more than 150 different samples, plus also data donations from our member. So from that vast amount of data, we can use to create the evaluation sheet. As mentioned before by Peter, in 2024, 2 more parts will be incorporated into the protocol to assess the recyclability of packaging in flotation de-inking mills, part 2, and specialized recycling mills for UBC in part 3. On the next slide, I will show you some general consideration in the recyclability evaluation protocol. First of all, and that's very important, fiber-based packaging can be recyclable in more than one type of recycling mill, as you already learned. Imagine your product fails the recyclability assessment in one type of mill. That does not imply any suitability for another type of recycling mill. So these tests are different and independent from each other. They are also, and that you will learn in the next slide from Peter, they have the same score logic, but they use different mathematical approaches. That's also very important to mention. So each recycling mill implies a different process setup and has dedicated requirements and parameters which are relevant for suitability of fiber-based packaging, for being successfully recycled, addressed in different test protocols. Of course, it's very important to have the fiber recovery, the so-called yield. But as you will see, also many other quality parameters are important to have a good quality product, and they are considered in the evaluation protocols. In the next slide now, Peter will explain it in more detail, what this exactly means.
Okay, so thanks, Johannes. And this is as the whole work in this alliance is a teamwork. So I will now drive you a little bit about through the details of this evaluation protocol. And this work has been done with working groups, with experts from the whole value chain. And this is the expertise that we have in our alliance here, that we have their recyclers in, but also then designers, converters, and the whole value chain of fiber-based packaging. And this expert groups, we have worked on these parameters and choosing the right ones that are relevant for assessing the recyclability of fiber-based packaging with this evaluation protocol that we have been drafting. So as you learned earlier, there are three different parts we have set up in this work in 4evergreen. So this is a standard mill, which is already included in the beta release of the evaluation protocol, where we have some parameters included, like the yield, the visual impurities, and the sheet adhesion. But also there are more parameters that have been discussed within these expert groups, which are potentially affecting the recyclability. And this is something we are currently discussing. So how to include them in the next version of the evaluation protocol. So these are just then the potential parameters, which you see here also on the slide, which are potentially affecting the recyclability and should due to this considered for the evaluation protocol and the scorecard calculation. When it comes to the other types of recycling mills, for the part 2, for the flotation deinking mill, this is using a different raw material mixture, meaning different types of input material, of fiber-based packaging, predominantly from white fiber-based, and this end use of the pulp generated in those type of recycling processes has also other quality requirements. And this is the reason why also different parameters are used to evaluate the recyclability in this part. So optical properties are quite important then for this type of recycling process. And this is what is then reflected also in those parameters you can see here, besides the yield parameter, of course, which is also very important for this type of recycling mill. When it comes to the specialized recycling process, so here the special the special issue that the used beverage carton recycling mills, they're not only recovering the fibers, which are measured then in the other approaches as well, but it's also very important to have quality, sufficient quality and defined quality of the reject, meaning the barrier that is also in the used beverage carton recycling mills recovered and more recycled, the so-called polyar fraction, which is seen then also as a valuable material. And this is why we also include aspects describing this part of the fiber-based packaging or the beverage carton in this case. So this is now here a flow chart where I want to show you as an example how this evaluation protocol or the test more in detail is working. So just as an example for the standard mill, so the standard mill is using this CEPI recyclability laboratory test method. And this is something I just want to run through with you together just very briefly how it works. So you start on the left side, as you see it, with any item of a fiber-based packaging you want to test. So it can be a corrugated box, it can be a folded box board. So every fiber-based packaging that you think of, you want to assess how well it's performing and if it's suitable for standard mill recycling. So first you start according to the CEPI test method, then you start preparing the item, you tear it or cut it down into smaller pieces. In the laboratory scale, you add some water. You repulp it under defined conditions. Then you take the pulp after this stage and remove coarse contaminants or also not properly repulped materials via a coarse screening stage. This is then also measured, the amount, and quantified how much material can't be recovered, which is then followed by a fine screening stage, which is then at the middle, at the bottom, then giving you some indication whether there are some flakes or fiber bundles that were not repulped properly or fragments of barriers, for example. And then finally, you're preparing of the accept of those screening stages, then sheets out of the pulp, which provide some information regarding the optical cleanliness, so visual impurities, whether there are some potentially tacky impurities in the pulp, or also adhesives, which you are then visualizing and evaluating with some parameters. And this is then the input of all of this procedure into the fiber-based packaging recyclability evaluation protocol. So the test results are the input for the evaluation protocol. So the other test methods look similar, but they have dedicated conditions reflecting also the industrial process, the industrial reference processes. So the parameters that are included right now in this beta release of the evaluation protocol for the standard mills, you can see here on this slide. So this beta release has been published in December 22. And since then, we have been working on gaining more experience, more data with this evaluation protocol to further improve it. And this will be then implemented then in the version 1 that will be published beginning of next year in January, as you saw on an earlier slide. So the parameter the parameters currently included here in this evaluation protocol. Part 1 for the standard mills are the coarse and fine reject, which is then calculated into a yield parameter for the evaluation, and this can reach then up to 100 points if all the fiber material or the paper can be repulped and used for paper making, or it can be also then get a negative score once you are exceeding then defined thresholds. So it means that you get then negative score points, which is then causing, of course, some failure or the overall failure of the test also potentially. Other quality parameters that you find in the scorecard are the sheet adhesion. So sheet adhesion describes whether there are some tacky impurities which are causing then in the paper making then also some issues, and this is some knockout parameter potentially. So if there are some issues with severe sheet adhesion, you might also then fail overall. This is why it's called then a knockout criteria, but also visual impurities is a quality parameters where you have dedicated levels described in the test method and then translated into a score in the evaluation scorecard, which is then resulting in a deduction from either 0 points deduction if there's no visual impurity issues, or if there are severe ones, depending on the type of visual impurities, you can also get a significant reduction in score. So the total score is then calculated following then the details in the scorecard. So in the end, the outcome of this evaluation scorecard is then -100 to +100 point. If you score a positive, so meaning 0 to 100, that means that this specific product that has been tested according to the CEPI method and using the evaluation protocol for the standard mills, that this can be considered as suitable for standard mill recycling. So the granularity in the score gives you some information how well it is performing, but all products that are scoring above 100 points are suitable for standard mill recycling. If you are obtaining a score below 0, meaning negative, this indicates that this specific product is not suitable for standard mill recycling. So it can be potentially recycled in other mill types. So as Johannes explained to you in an earlier slide already, so every specific recycling process, like the inking mill, flotation mill, is using slightly different process setups, meaning also different process capabilities, and certain packaging can be also perfectly matched than this type of recycling processes. So no implications can be given just based on testing it for the standard mill. And the design for recycling, this was mentioned in an earlier slide today, also in terms of the packaging and packaging waste regulation. The design for recycling approach is something that we find implemented in the packaging and packaging waste regulation process. And this is a starting point. If we start here on this slide from the right side, so design for recycling guideline is, or the design for recycling approach is implemented, has been implemented in the packaging waste regulation approach when it comes to recyclability and performance grades. So this is the target where we are heading. So we need design for recycling guidelines, design for recycling tables, as Peter has explained earlier today. But to be able to set up this design for recycling guidelines in tables with the ratings, whether it's fully compatible, conditionally or not compatible, this requires some information. And Peter also told you earlier that we are now in this phase of translating or in the transition phase of moving from an expert-based design for recycling tables into a fact-based design for recycling guideline or tables. And this means you need tests to be done. You need an evaluation protocol to translate the test results and into these design tables. And this is something where we need then our evaluation protocol as some key element in this whole methodology. So it means we have the need for the evaluation protocol for the individual recycling reference processes, and those evaluation protocols are fed by the different lab test methods. As you saw earlier, the CEPI harmonized lab test method for recycling tests is one method, and 4evergreen has been working on lab test methods for the flotation deinking process as a reference process, and the lab method for the specialized mills for the UBC. This is another lab procedure that will be available by the end of the year. So all those things feed then basically into the design for recycling process, not directly, but indirectly via the design for recycling guidelines and tables. And this is something I'm also then addressing now here on my almost on my final slides here again. So what we are currently doing, and this is the phase where we are in this alliance as well here, we have been doing this gap analysis in our alliance. So what is looking at the package and waste regulation and the design for recycling approach, what you see here in the picture on the bottom, what is the gap that still needs to be filled. So we have a clear target. The design for recycling guidelines and design tables are needed to fulfill those requirements. But now we need to figure out how to make then this connection of the recyclability evaluation protocol output and translate it then into the design tables. So this is something which is currently ongoing, and this work has been started. And this is something where a lot of discussion is still needed, but we are on a very good way, because we have now, with this design for recycling guidelines and the evaluation protocol, the tools available so that we have really the important elements at hand already to do this. But just then the details, this is something that we need to figure out now, how to make it then really in a methodology described, how to translate then the test results into evaluation score, and then finally also into the design tables. And this is now something on the last slide I just want to summarize again, because this is a quite important topic, how to read also then this evaluation protocol output in terms of the package and waste regulation. So what does the score of the evaluation protocol mean, and what does it not mean? So I try to give you some insights here into the way how it has been, how it is set up, so how it's generated the score. You see on the left side here the lab method again with the parameters. So this is empirically how we evaluate then the score. So we obtain some lab results, and from the parameters, from the results, we translate this with the evaluation protocol into a score, which is in this range from -100 to +100 points. And this score describes whether a certain fiber-based packaging is suitable for a dedicated recycling process. So in our case now here, what you see here on the screen, this is describing then the parameters for the standard mill recycling, and other parameters with a separate scorecard will give you this information, whether it's suitable or not suitable for a dedicated recycling process. So since we are using in our evaluation protocol not only the yield parameter, also meaning the yield or how many fibers we can recover, but also quality parameter. So this means that this yield parameter itself is not the same as a 4evergreen recyclability score. So other parameters, quality parameters, are considered in this calculation of the score, which means that the final outcome of this calculation is describing more than just the yield in this calculation. And last but not least here, again, to highlight the relevance for the packaging and packaging waste regulation discussion. So the 4evergreen recyclability score is not the same as a performance grading or recyclability score under packaging waste regulation. So it is a key element to feed into this secondary legislation, into the design for recycling, but it's not meant to be directly used or used as a final statement to claim then any compliance with performance grades under the packaging and packaging waste regulation. So it's it's really an essential tool as set for the design for recycling approach. And the practical aspect is also with the design for recycling, we have then this chance to avoid individual testing of packaging by referring to design for recycling tables. And this is now something where I want to hand over to Fabio. So giving you some insights now also from companies who have implemented in this evaluation protocol and our deliverables, and he will give you some example how this has been implemented in his company.
Yeah, thank you, Peter, and good afternoon, everyone. Also from my side, my name is Fabio Peyer. I'm the head of sustainability for Mondi Flexible Packaging. And indeed, I will be giving you a glimpse of how we as Mondi are leveraging, some of the deliverables of 4evergreen to really drive a circular portfolio. for us, in line with our sustainability goals, but also for our customer, from the industry overall, also in preparation for future regulatory requirements, as already mentioned. As Mondi, just to give you a sense of how we are engaging with 4evergreen today, as Mondi, we have been on this journey for a long time. We have been one of the founding members back in 2020, so we have been part of this journey since the beginning. Today, we are actively participating in 4 working streams. One is workstream 1, 2, 3, and workstream 5, and we're also members of the cross workstream group on standardization. So, as Mondi, we have been investing into capabilities and technologies to drive circularity in our portfolio for a long time. One of the most recent examples of that is the opening of a state-of-the-art recyclability test lab dedicated to paper packaging. That test lab is in one of our mills here in Austria, so it's an in-house capability we have. The test lab obviously allows us to generate empirical data on recyclability of products of ours. And to do that, we apply the CEPI recyclability lab test method that was mentioned several times in the previous presentation. If you're familiar with the method, and also as Peter showed in one of his slides, you will recognize some of the equipment describing the method in the pictures here in the bottom of the slide. You see a repulper, you see a fractionator, you see a sheet device as well. Why we use the CEPI method? Well, the answer to that is very simple. It is a method that gives us data that we can reproduce. A reproducible method is a very credible method because of that, and is a very well accepted method as well in the marketplace. As Peter also mentioned, while the method, right, gives you the hard data in terms of packaging recyclability, it is with the help of the 4evergreen recyclability evaluation protocol that we can then bring those data to life, right? We can make it meaningful for our stakeholders along the value chain, and we make sure that we drive decision-making out of it. So what you see on this slide is just the way that we, as Mondi, are using the recyclability evaluation protocol to visualize the test results that we produce in-house in our lab across the various parameters that we measure. You see that on the left-hand side of this slide, yield, visual impurities, sheet adhesion, as also commented by Peter. This is, by the way, not a dummy example. This is a real-world example based on a real-world product of ours. We call it the functional barrier paper 95.5. This is a coated paper solution of ours. It's essentially a craft paper substrates coated with a very thin PE coating on top to functionalize that paper. Right? So here it is, an example of how we as Mondi utilize the deliverables of 4evergreen to drive circularity and make sure that we can do that together with our customers by sharing credible data with them. And with that, I'll turn it over to the next speaker, Niels from Amcor.
Yes, thank you. Give me 1 second. Okay. Good. I will skip this slide. Hello, I'm Niels de Rijbel from Amcor. I'm a product development engineer. I've been part of 4evergreen, I think, for somewhere around 2 years now, and I'm involved mostly in workstream 1, but Amcor as a whole has representatives in workstream 2 and also in workstream 5. So we are heavily involved in the ongoing developments and discussions in 4evergreen. Maybe a quick talk about Amcor itself. So we are a global player. We're one of the biggest converting companies in the industry. And one of our main goals is that by 2025 that we have a portfolio which is 100% recyclable or reusable. We're agnostic in the sense that we promote paper or monoplastic materials. The sole goal that we have for our future developments is that we can provide customers with a solution that can be recycled with local infrastructure. And in terms of helping with that, especially for Europe, we're trying to strive for harmonization of the recyclability evaluation in the packaging industry, because as you know, one of the key pain points for any packaging supplier is able to prove or to have some guidelines in hand to show to the brand owners or to converting customers that the developments are in fact recyclable or can be recycled. Okay, moving forward. So as I just mentioned, today there is still some issues on the market because the PPWR is not fully ready. The European Union is working on this, but especially if we look a little bit further in the past, we see there needs to be clear criteria to design recyclable packaging. Because if you have vague rules that can create unclear evaluations and you get then a plethora of, let's say, pseudo evaluations that come onto the market where you try to convince your customers that the testing you have done is viable. And additionally, designers think outside of the box. They always come up with new solutions. And if that doesn't fit in any of the regulations or rules that are set out, it becomes very challenging to evaluate if these new developments are in fact recyclable or just not acceptable at all. So in the current, let's say, climate today, you see different testing protocols, different evaluation protocols, also different guidelines. This depends country from country. Comparing the UK to France, you see a vast difference in the evaluation handed and the communication given. So hopefully with Europe on its own taking the lead, at least within Europe, with PPWR, this can be harmonized, and I think 4evergreen can play a role in that. And finally, also as a brand owner, if you sit in that chair, it's a sort of almost a hot seat in order to prove to the end consumer, which can be critical, which can also have legal repercussions if you don't have test-driven or at least fact-driven data to support the claims that you try to put on novel packaging. So I'm very hopeful. I'm also very glad for the work that 4evergreen has done, because one of the key aims of 4evergreen is to set out the protocol, the lab tests, which is the SEPI method, the guidelines, which was just discussed by Peter, to help you as a designer to see which criteria are there, and obviously then also the evaluation in order to evaluate if you are uncertain and if you have a novel development to see what the outcome of your packaging could be when it would be put into a simulation of a recycling mill. Now, the final part I think is also important. It doesn't matter if you develop a method and an evaluation if it's not if there's not a multiple of labs that can test. So what we've seen is that not only within Europe, even outside of Europe's, there are labs that seek certification or at least provide certification based on the SEPI method and the 4evergreen evaluation. And I think this is a key tool as a designer where you have some new developments that are not so easy to assess. So I'm going to move to the next slide. So one example where we actually were using the tools that were developed in 4evergreen is the development of AmFiber performance paper. So AmFiber performance paper it has been launched on the market, and this paper is a highly recyclable high barrier paper. And then in the design process, although it was still in development back then, we were leaning on the design guidelines to sort of select our materials, to select which barrier components, which ratio of components of paper and non-paper could help us to fit within the criteria, and also to expedite the development, because the clearer the criteria, the easier it is to also dismiss ideas that you know beforehand that wouldn't work. Based on this, we made a plethora of versions which were tested according to the recyclability evaluation protocol, which landed us on a subset of a couple of versions, which are now on the market under the brand name Fiber Performance Paper. So with this clear results on recyclability and what the rejects are, so which elements are not recyclable, we were able to go to our customers and say, this is a base structure, this is what the results are. And then with the input of customers, also test different designs and show the impact of ink and certain designs on the final structure. So all in all, I am very positive on the way of working and the tools that have been developed. And I really hope that the work that has been done within 4evergreen together with the SAPI organization can be used to put forward to the European Union and be largely implemented in the PPWR. Thank you very much. And I'll hand it over to the next person.
Yeah, Niels, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Also from my side, a warm welcome. I hope you can hear me all right, and you are enjoying the webinar so far. My name is Wilke Völcher. I'm a sales and business development manager at Actiga, and my focus is on functional barrier coatings for fiber-based food packaging applications. And yeah, today it's my pleasure to present to you Actiga's testimonial, and I would like to share with you our thoughts on the tools that were presented today and how we benefit as a company from the Alliance. So if we go to the next slide, I would like to start with a few words about Actiga, and after that dive deeper in our work or into our work in the Alliance. Actiga is a specialty chemicals company, part of the Altana Group. And within Altana, Actiga is the packaging specialist, which means we develop and produce specialty coatings, inks, adhesives, and sealants for all kinds of packaging applications. And we have a global footprint, R&D and production facilities in all major regions, and around 1,400 employees worldwide. We joined 4evergreen back in 2022, and there are several reasons for that, or why we want to become a member. Most importantly is the common goal that all members share, which is to improve the circularity of fiber-based packaging materials and increase the recycling rate within the industry. And in order to do so, you basically need to consider the whole value chain, right? From raw materials to end of life and much more, bringing everyone to the table and combining their expertise. And with that being said, in the end, you really want a clear target and a harmonized approach. And that helps us to stay ahead or comply with current and upcoming regulation, like, for example, the PPWR. And within the Alliance, we contribute to the work streams that were presented today, but also we gain a lot of insights in order to improve our products in our daily work. More on that on the next slide. So what's our experience using the tools presented today, and what does it mean for us? I think we can all agree that sustainability is a huge trend in today's world, and especially in the packaging industry. New solutions are coming up every day, innovative approaches and technologies are being introduced, and regulation is being shaped. And these innovations and regulations, in my opinion, bring a lot of opportunities, but also a lot of uncertainty, because in the end, if you don't have a clear guideline on what to consider and how to assess sustainability of a packaging, then all these innovations can be quite overwhelming. And 4evergreen, in my opinion, has done a tremendous job with introducing the recyclability evaluation protocol and the circularity by design guideline, because it introduces a clear and structured approach to this. And for us as a chemical supplier, this has become a major driver for our product development and also for our portfolio decisions in general, because if you think about the recyclability of a fiber-based material, because that's what it comes down in the end to at the end, right? It's usually not the fibers who are causing the issues in the recycling. It's when you talk about low fiber yield, stickies, visual impurities, these are majorly caused by all the other materials that you need to functionalize and produce a paper-based packaging. I mean, I'm talking about inks, barrier coatings, adhesives, all these kind of things. And so the choice of chemistry and developing the right solution for functionalization of fiber-based materials is crucial. And since good recyclability is basically the key of fiber-based packaging and having a high quality material after recycling, for us as a chemical supplier, we have decided to screen our entire coatings portfolio according to the recyclability evaluation protocol. So this is a cornerstone for our development, a cornerstone for the decision what we put out into the market, because what we don't want and what our customers don't want is to that our products cause any issues at a later stage in the process, at a later stage in the use phase, and also at the end of life. And so we need to make sure that it doesn't cause any challenges later on and complies obviously with the current and upcoming regulation. So for that, we have 2 laboratories actually in-house where we can assess the recyclability of fiber-based materials according to SEPI 2. One of them is located here in Germany, in Bremen, where I'm located, and the other one we set up in the US actually. So it's even across Europe or even in a different continent, playing a role for our assessment. And so in a nutshell, the tools that were developed by the 4evergreen Alliance and are being constantly reviewed and updated help us to evaluate and lower the impact of our products. We can provide clear answers to our customers because, like Niels already said, we need to have clear and data-driven answers towards how to assess and evaluate the sustainability of a packaging solution. And also the tools help us to make sure to comply with regulations, maybe the upcoming PPWR or everything which comes after that. And yeah, with that, I'm at the end of my part of the presentation. I can say it's been a pleasure to present our thoughts and that we are very happy to be part of the 4evergreen Alliance. And yeah, thank you very much.
Super. Thanks so much, Luca, and thanks so much to all the presenters for walking us through both the 4evergreen deliverables, but also sharing some of those insights from company testimonials, just showing how the deliverables are supporting companies in implementing the learnings and best practice and protocols. We now move to the next item on the agenda. We've got the last, say, 20 minutes or so reserved for Q&A. So I see some questions already coming into the chat, but please don't hesitate to jump in and ask your questions now. We've got number of experts assembled that can give you tailored answers. And maybe we start, Johannes and Peter, related to workstream 1 and the recyclability evaluation protocol that you presented. I see a couple of questions that are touching on your area. And so maybe you could perhaps go first. I see a question from Thomas asking basically about which types of fiber-based packaging products would go into a de-inking mill. Why is that relevant within the mills that we're looking at? Also a question from Maria about what does it mean when your score in your test method is close to 0? What can we infer from that? And also maybe something about micro stickies and the recyclability assessment. So 3 different questions. I'll throw them to both of you and maybe you can share them.
Yes, so maybe I start with the first one regarding this de-inking mill. So I think this is also something, unfortunately, where in whole Europe we don't have the same collection and sorting schemes in place in all the countries. So there are quite some different systems in place for good reasons also. But what is happening already today is certain types of fiber-based packaging, which has same characteristics or very similar characteristics like graphic paper. So meaning some mineral coated packaging that have a certain size, like small boxes or some other items. They are detected in the sorting or potentially detected also as some very similar to graphic paper, and this means also that they are fed into those grades that are sorted as an input to the deinking mills. So from this point of view, there's already some material which is ending up in the deinking mills, and it means it needs to fulfill also the requirements of the deinking mill. But also we have this potential, keeping in mind that the inking mills today and also in future will need the white fiber, and a white fiber which is has been mixed into a brown fiber loop for corrugated packaging can't be separated anymore. So it's also some opportunity for high value material of bleached fibers to be recycled in this type of recycling mills. So this is one of those aspects.
Okay. Second question, I can take over. So the question was, what can I do when I'm close to zero? In this case, I would recommend to really review exactly why you have been the deduction of points, and because I would look whether you can change the design slightly. Imagine, for instance, with the yield, maybe with the yield you are close to zero because you have a lot of rejects. Then it would make sense to review the formulation to have a little bit a safer distance from failing. So that would be the recommendation.
Yeah, and maybe if I take then the last, very briefly, this micro stickies. I think this was the last question I saw here. Of course, stickies or adhesives, this has been quite a long experience already, a long discussion about this topic. This is really difficult to measure, and this is something where also in our work, in our evaluation protocol, and we have been discussing this topic, but still there is some work to be done, and we are in this alliance contributing to these things that we are figuring out in our evaluation protocol. If there's a need for something, we clearly flag it, but we are not, of course, able to solve all the challenges that have been there for 20 years or something in the paper industry. So there are some things ahead of us. So if you have their solutions, so you're always welcome, of course, to provide and contribute.
Super. Thanks, Peter and Johannes. And maybe one last one while you guys have the microphone, but around, you talked a lot about the recyclability evaluation protocol, but if I want to get my products tested, where can I do that? Is there, where does it get performed according to the CEPI method?
Yeah, so on the CEPI, on the CEPI website, you can find there also some references for laboratories. So this is something where you find it also, quite some laboratories all over Europe that have been participated also in validation rounds to ensure that the results you're getting are also then providing then the same comparable results wherever it has been tested.
Okay, super. Thanks, Peter. Peter Gorlitz, maybe I come to you next. There's a question in the chats around how does the 4evergreen circularity by design guideline support collaboration across the packaging value chain, including designers, manufacturers, recyclers, to achieve circularity goals? So any additional comments or perspectives on that kind of bigger picture?
Well, I can basically repeat what was already said in the presentation. It is the result, what we can see, the design for recycling guideline is the result of this collaboration. When you look at the member base of 4evergreen, you have all of these in the 4evergreen, and they are sitting together to basically look at the design guidelines, and there are heated discussions, I would say, and different opinions on what can be considered recyclable or not recyclable, or maybe something in between. So this is the type of collaboration already happening in 4evergreen with all those mentioned stakeholders, but it does not end there. Once we have published the guidelines, This is when then the external stakeholders come into play and they look at it and they basically say, we confirm your assessment, or we do have certain other views we would like to you to consider. And that is when we then have discussions with those stakeholders and basically find out if our position is okay or if we should change it according to a new input that we receive from the outside. So this is one point, and it's not just the design guidelines which needs input from the outside world, but it's also, as we mentioned before, data donations, which are very welcome, right? So as we said before, we have a lot of expert opinion, and we have been doing replacing these parts with evidence-based results from recycling. However, 4evergreen has limits on to how much it can test. And then there is the opportunity, basically, say, if you have tested and you would like to contribute your data to 4evergreen development, then you can do so and reach out to the Alliance. So I would say the collaboration is happening inside and outside of 4evergreen.
Very super. Thanks, Peter. Maybe we touch the question on what are the top priorities for Evergreen in the future, and maybe I could cover that one, just reflecting on the strategy for 4evergreen over the next couple of years. Essentially, the strategy has 3 pillars. The first one's around completing the 4evergreen toolbox of deliverables. So we see the agenda that we have over the coming months and the next revisions that we are having on track for publishing. And so that's been a big focus over this last year, but I guess the work doesn't stop. There's always new learnings, new information, new data to incorporate as well. So a big focus on completing the toolbox and then keeping it up to date with the best practice. Our second pillar is around really leveraging these deliverables. So it's been a lot of work, a lot of consensus building, a lot of discussions and testing, etc., to develop these deliverables. Now, in order to reach our target and our goal of 90% recycling rate, we of course need as many stakeholders as possible using these deliverables. So we'll have even an expanded focus on leveraging these deliverables to make an impact in the coming years. And I think that also links back to this discussion around PPWR. How can we leverage our deliverables also into the standardization process to share our learnings, to support that industry input and best practice is reflected in secondary legislation. And then the third pillar of our strategy for the next few years is around generating value and insights for members. And there we have an expanded focus on innovation, and not so much product innovation, because of course that's what happens within companies, but really looking at future-focused system innovation and what type of solutions are required, what kind of thinking is required to really tackle some of the challenges or bottlenecks that we see for perfecting circularity. So that will be a growing focus, I think, inside the Alliance in the future. So that, from my side, my perspective, is a few of the top priorities for 4evergreen in the future, to touch on that question. But I also see someone else asked a question about innovation. And so maybe I come to Janne's question and open it for all the panelists if anyone would like to share perspective on it. The question is, how do you see the role of innovations in fiber recycling technologies? PPWR is not setting mandatory targets for recycling technology itself, but as there will be major changes in recycled paper composition, it is quite clear that recycling technology should develop as well to reach the recycled at scale targets. So I open that question to the panelists if anyone would like to share a view on that. Niels?
Yeah, I would like to share my view. I think obviously if the criteria is set, the stream of paper might be changing somewhat because of packaging, although we have to be fair. The majority of the current stream is cardboard, and I think that will not hugely change. But let's say in the coming 10 years, there will be some changes needed at the mill as well. I think what will happen if the PPWR is set that on a national level, most countries will have to assess what the capacity is, and also mills will continuously give feedback through SAPI and to 4evergreen to see if some developments might have to be ruled out or changed to make sure that the stream doesn't get contaminated to a point that it's almost reducing the capacity that we currently have. So I think it's sort of a equilibrium that will find itself. And if you want to put that into a certain rule or a set of laws, that will be very challenging. I think the market will do that its work there, as long as there's a continuous feedback loop through SAPI and the 4evergreen evaluation.
And Peter.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Go ahead, Peter.
which one? Which Peter? Sorry,
Yes.
Peter one.
Angus back, you can go first. I see you're number 1, but yeah, I laughed to myself as well that I've got Peter 1 and Peter 2. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think just to add to this, what Niels just said, I think this was also in the beginning of 4evergreen that we realized so that there are processes out there, this de-inking, flotation de-inking, and the specialized mill, and this is the most relevant aspect. So our ultimate target is to ensure that the fiber-based packaging is recycled at scale, that the volume and everything, it's not only theoretically, but that it's really happening out there. And this is why also in our work and our journey in 4evergreen, we have adapted in our approach saying, okay, it's not only the standard mill, there's also something else. And this is something which we addressed in our deliverables accordingly. And this is, I think, the ultimate target, to increase then the fiber-based packaging. And I might say, as long as it's recycled, everything is fine and into a valuable material. So this is the main purpose.
Thanks, Peter. And Peter Grillitz, I give you the last word on this question, then we'll move on.
Yeah, thank you. I would also say that in 4evergreen, we are trying to go a level lower. At the moment, we are not focusing on, or rather trying to promote innovation in the recycling sector, but basically we want to first find out what is the status of recycling in the industry, right? Well, how does for example, you remember we are talking about standard paper mills, we talk about the inking paper mills, and we talk about specialized paper mills, but what actually is a specialized paper mill, and how do you have to design your packaging that it actually performs in a specialized paper mill? And that is quite a task to have all this data. We are working on this project for a longer time now. Data is coming in, so we are actually assembling all of this to basically have the baseline and say, and this is what you need to consider when you want to be recyclable in this industry, in this paper mill. And if you want to do innovation, then you have to start from the baseline.
Super. Thanks, Peter. Peter, maybe you could keep the mic on your side. I see a question that maybe requires just a little bit of a preliminary explanation around what type of products are actually going into standard mills, de-inking mills, and specialized mills. I think we talked quite a bit about our part 1, 2, and 3 of our deliverables and those different types of mills, but maybe just a few words on the different packaging types that are going into those mills.
Yeah, so when it comes to the design, obviously, I showed you the decision tree where you can make a very, very rough assumption of where do you want to go to with your packaging to find the right part. Just to get an impression of what would end up in which industry, in which paper mill. The standard paper mills would obviously try to recycle all those papers which are uncoated, and then those which are compatible with the installation of those paper mills. That could be a coating, but the coating should be removable from the pulp and as one, and should not contaminate the final product. So that would be a standard paper mill. The inking, basically, as we heard before, is a special type of paper, and it has to have a certain quality. It has to be white usually, and it has to have an application of either paints, inks, maybe lacquers, which can be removed by the flotation, the inking process. As we heard before, these would be typically non-packaging materials, but as we are looking into this, we also see certain types of packaging, and Peter Henkesbach had mentioned that boxes, for example, which have been printed and with white paper, which end up in this type of paper mill. The specialized is a bit more diverse and more difficult to basically tell what is supposed to go into a specialized paper mill. Specialized paper mills have the ability, or rather they are designed to pulp certain type of qualities of paper bales. Often it's not so much the material itself, but it's the paper bale which defines where can it be recycled. And you have low consistency pulp, if you high consistency pulp, or some of them are very specialized and can pulp paper cups, for example. Others are specialized to pulp used beverage cartons, and then there are even others which have a wider acceptance of material. Usually, we would find those types of packaging in this paper mill, which are more difficult to break down because of its material composition, because water cannot enter the fiber so easily, or there might be other complications. As I said, this is a bit more difficult to define, but we are in the process of actually having an overview of all those specialized paper mills and what they are capable to work with and what is their input material.
Nice. Thanks, Peter. I think that was a very thorough explanation, and also covers some of the questions that continue to come in. So thanks for explaining that. Now, I know we're right at the end of our webinar. I will take one or two more questions, and then we're going to have a few closing remarks and directions for next steps from 4evergreen. But maybe to pass it back to Peter and Johannes, there's a couple questions here that I think relate to your area. Is a quick one is a sheet adhesion test, a measurement of stickies. And yeah, if there was any, I see one question here, is it proven that the CEPI method results correspond to best available method, etc. So maybe if you have any quick insights that you want to share there, and then we'll try to wrap it up. Peter or Johannes, either of you want to take that one?
Maybe I start with the stickies. I think the stickies, this is something which is reflected and with a sheet adhesion test. Of course, any tacky impurities that we have that we might remain in the pulp, we could then detect with this approach. But there are also other methods available for addressing than sticky, so macro sticky, so meaning bigger particles of adhesive substances. So there are different methods. So at least we have something included, but there are more methods, and of course we can't include all the different methods in this. But we went this approach to take then something which is as robust as possible, and also then as meaningful for the relevance for the recyclability assessment for the industry.
Okay, and for the second question, whether the CEPI method result corresponds to the best available method, so this is something which is not studied by 4evergreen. This is part of the CEPI recyclability methods, and they have a committee with recyclers which is meeting regularly. So this question should be addressed to CEPI directly.
Super. Thanks, Johannes. And I think some of the other questions from Carmen around capacity of specialized mills and is there enough to reach 90% target? I think that was also, Peter, you kind of referred to that mapping of specialized mills and our attempts to try to get a clear picture on that one, as well as the question from Sandeep about if package is only recyclable in a specialized mill, how do you ensure it gets directed into that appropriate mill? I think that question as well was touched on a bit by your response, Peter, but if there was any final comment there that you wanted to clarify.
Yeah, maybe just to add, at the tests, someone mentioned also earlier that this is a permanent change also. So there is a conversion of recycling lines. There are new products, different collection schemes are evolving in certain areas. So this is something where we need to grow, and this is now the key message also of the packaging waste regulation, that there are clear targets and requirements in future. In the industry is now adapting then to those needs. And this is the key mission why we are working here together on this topic.
Maybe I can also add to this and say we haven't presented today the deliverable of our workstream 3, which is talking about collection and sorting and basically capacities. And there's also valuable information in this document, so you can also refer to this one if you want to learn more about it.
Super. Thank you both for those last remarks. I think they were very, very timely and very pertinent. And indeed, we haven't touched on the workstream 3 work in today's webinar, and that really hits home for those questions as well. So thank you all for your participation. I think just in our last minutes together, I wanted to direct you to, I believe this goes to the 4evergreen website. So if you want to have a look there, download the current guidelines, and keep an eye open as we publish these next revisions that were discussed today on our website. And also, if you're interested in joining 4evergreen as a member, there's also a Join Us tab on the website that can lead you to contact directly the Secretariat and express your interest. There's also, we are continuing with our annual conference each year in November, this year in Brussels. Its registration is now open, so please feel free to register and join the conversation, join the discussions. Indeed, there's so many moving elements from a policy perspective, from products, from practice. So it's great that we can find these times to sit together, to discuss and to learn. And indeed, that's what this conference is focused on: new horizons for fiber-based packaging circularity. So November 6th is the date. Mark your calendars and don't forget to register. And finally, just to, again, if you'd like to learn more about 4evergreen, follow our latest news on social media. Those are the different contact points, and don't hesitate to get in touch. And I think last but not least, as we reach our timing of 3:30, I would just like to say a very big thank you, first and foremost, to our speakers and panelists. Thank you very much for not only the work you're doing in the work streams, but also for sharing those learnings and applications with the audience today. Also to Logos and Workstream 5 for all their behind-the-scenes support on our communications efforts here. And of course, thanks to all those participants out there for spending the afternoon with us and learning about 4evergreen and seeing how these deliverables in this next versions are shaping up. So thank you all. Pleasure to spend this time with you. And we'll stay in touch. Thank you.
Thank you also for the good moderation.
Thanks.